Welcome to Sneakers, Cars, and Leadership. I'm Dre Hub. Let's get into it. We're 3 episodes into this series, The Algorithm Doesn't Care About Your Title. Part one was about your clarity, your ability to breathe prompt, your delegation discipline. Part two was about your organization, the bottleneck that has a name tag, and the courage it takes to name it. I'm excited for part 3. So part 3 is about the space between you and your team, the invisible infrastructure that determines whether everything you're trying to build actually gets built, or whether it sits on the slide deck and calls itself strategy. The episode is called The Trust Deficit. And I want to be clear about the theses before we go any further.
They move different, they think different. Leaders on the rise. Sneakers clean, right, pristine, sharp between the eyes. SCL in your ear now, culture in the craft. Sneakers, cars, and leadership, built to last.
Here's the leadership tension I want to sit in today. You've announced an AI initiative, or your organization has. There's been a rollout plan, probably some training, maybe a pilot program, and the adoption numbers, the actual usage, the integration into daily work, the behavior change, it's not where they need to be. And the narrative inside the organization is that people need more training or better tools or a clear mandate from the top. And some of that may be even true, but here's what's also true and what nobody is willing to say in the debrief. People don't fully engage with tools that expose their thinking in organizations where they don't trust what leadership will do with what they see. Think about what AI actually asks of your team. It asks them to put their reasoning in writing in a prompt. It asks them to show their work in a way that's more visible, more searchable, and more attributable to than anything they ever done before. It asks them to produce output that can be directly compared to the output of their peers and to the output of the tool itself. That is an enormous ask in a low trust environment. Because in a low trust environment, visibility is risk. Showing your work means showing your gaps. And if your team has learned through experience, not paranoia, that gaps get used against people rather than developed through people, they are not going to show their work. They're going to use the tool at a minimal pace, just from perform, and in ways that protect them rather than advance the work. That's not resistance. That's rational self-preservation. And it won't change until the trust changes. The question for today is, and how do you know if you have trust deficit? And more importantly, what do you actually do about it? Before we really get deep into it, we're going to talk about the kicks of the day. Today's pick is the Allen Edmonds Park Avenue Walnut Brown. And I want to be very clear about the color, not black walnut, okay? Walnut. The Black Park Avenue is the interview shoe. It's pristine, it's formal, it's been worn twice and conditioned once and lives in a dust bag in the back of a closet until the next occasion requires it. That shoe is performative. It's a dress for audience. The walnut pair is different. The walnut pair has been resold. There are 3 years of boardroom miles on that leather. The toe has a crease that no amount of conditioning will fully erase because it's been bent in the same spot hundreds of times, walking into rooms, sitting in meetings, standing at the head of tables. The heel counter has softened to the exact shape of the foot that's worn it. That walnut pear looks better now than the day it came out of the box. Not desperate to wear because of it. The patina is the proof. You cannot fake 3 years of boardroom miles. You cannot apply it overnight. It's accumulated one day at a time, one decision at a time, one kept promise at a time. That is earned trust. The black shoe is stated trust. Trust me, I am dressed for the occasion. The walnut shoe, it demonstrated trust. Here's the record of every time I showed up. One claim, the other is history. Your team, they know the difference between a black and a walnut. They always do. They've been watching longer than you think, and they are keeping score in ways you may not be aware of. Not out of malice, it's out of survival. Because their careers depend on it. It depends on reading leadership accurately. So today's pick is the walnut pear. And the question it asks is, what does your leather look like? What's the record that your team is reading when they describe how much to trust you with their visibility? The ride of the day. Today's pick is a 1969 Ford Bronco, restored, not resto molded. And that distinction is the whole point. So stay with me here. Stay with me here. Resto mod takes a classic vehicle and replaces the original components with modern ones. New engine, modern suspension, updated electronics. It looks like the original from the outside, but underneath it's been re-engineered. It performs better than it did. It's more reliable. It's easier to live with. And it is not the same vehicle. A restored Bronco, that's different. The original drivetrain is intact. The steering has the weight and the feedback it was born with. More connected, more demanding, more honest than power-assisted modern systems. When you're in it, there is no illusion of the modern touches. You know exactly what you're in. You feel every input. The relation between you and the machine is direct and unmedicated. The resto mod, like trust and performs like trust, but the original relationship has been replaced. The restored Bronco is the real thing, harder to drive, more demanding, more honest, and worth every bit of the work it took to bring it back. Most leaders are trying to build resto mod trust. They want the aesthetic of a trusted leader without doing the underlying work. New communication strategy, updated feedback process, redesigned town hall format. All of it is cosmetic. Correct? None of it touching the original relationship, which is built on whether people believe you will tell them the truth, protect them when it's hard, and fight for them when it costs you something. Today's pick is for the leaders who are willing to do the restoration work. Not the resto mod, the actual work, the slow, expensive, difficult process of building the original relationship with your team. One honest conversation, one kept commitment, one moment of protection at a time. That's the ride. So let's talk about how to do it. Let me give you the diagnostics first. Because before you can build trust, you have to be honest about where you actually are. Most leaders overestimate their trust level because they're measuring the wrong things. Trust is not engagement scores. Engagement measures how people feel about their work on the day they filled out the survey. It influenced by compensation, workload, team dynamics, and a dozen other variables that have nothing to do with whether they trust you. Trust is not tenure. People stay in organizations for a lot of reasons: compensation, inertia, benefits, the economy, their kids' school district, blah, 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 blah. Longevity is not loyalty. Loyalty is not trust. Don't confuse the fact that people haven't left with evidence that they believe in what you're doing. Trust is not friendliness. If your team laughs at your jokes and engages warmly in meetings and responds quickly to your messages, that tells you that they are professionally competent social operators. It tells you nothing about whether they will tell you an uncomfortable truth, show you a failure in progress, or use a tool that makes their work more visible in the moment of organizational uncertainty. The three real indicators of trust. Indicator one, the uncontrollable truth test. When was the last time someone on your team told you something you didn't want to hear, unprompted, without being in the formal feedback session, without a process requiring it? Not in a survey, not in a 360, in a real conversation, in real time, because they believe it was safe to say it and that they are saying it would matter. If you have to think hard to remember the last time this happened, you may have a trust deficit. Indicator two, the failure visibility test. When something goes wrong in your organization, a missed deadline, a dropped ball, a decision that didn't land, how does your team handle the information flow? Do problems surface quickly and directly to you? Or do they get managed, softened, and presented to you only after they've been contained? If you are consistently surprised by problems that turn out to have been visible to your team for weeks before they reached you, that is a trust signal. They didn't think it was safe to bring it to you uncontained. Indicator three, the AI adoption test. Watch how your team uses AI tools when they know you're watching versus when they don't. A high trust team uses the tools the same way in both conditions because they're not managing your perception of their work. They're actually doing the work. A low trust team will demo well and adopt at a minimum. They'll produce polished AI assisted outputs for visibility occasions and revert to their previous methods for everything else. Because in a low trust environment, the tool is a performance prop, it's not a productive instrument. If any of those three indicators suggest a gap, resist the instinct to immediately go fix the symptoms. Don't announce a new feedback process. Don't schedule a listening tour. Don't launch like a psychology safety initiative. Those are resto mod moves. They look like trust building, but they don't build trust. But build trust is slower, more focused, more personal. Let's talk about what it actually looks like. Trust is built through four mechanisms, not policies, not programs, mechanisms. Really focused, repeatable behaviors that accumulate over time into a track record your team can read. Mechanism one, consistently between words and decisions. Your team is not listening to what you say. They are watching what you decide. Every time your stated values and your actual decisions are aligned, you make a deposit in them. Every time they divulge, every slightly, even for understandable reasons, you make a withdrawal. That is the one that breaks most leaders because the divergence are usually rational in the moment. They say you value the work-life balance and you sent them a Sunday night email with an urgent ask. You said you were committed to developing people, and then you staffed a highly visible project with a safe choice instead of the development choice. You said you wanted honest feedback, and then you got visibly cold toward the person who gave it to you in the meeting. None of those individual moments destroys trust, but they accumulate. And your team has a running ledger. The question is not whether you've ever made a withdrawal. The question is whether your deposits outweigh them by enough margin that your team still believes the stated values are real. The gap between what you say and what you decide is the single most accurate predictor of your team's trust level. They cannot tell you this directly. You can only show through their behavior, including their AI adoption behavior. Mechanism two, protection under pressure. This is the mechanism that separates leaders who are liked from leaders who are trusted. Protection under pressure means that when it costs you something politically, relationally, your reputation, you still have your team's back. It shows up in key moments. The meeting where someone above you criticizes your team's work and you push back instead of nodding. The performance conversation where everyone above you wants to move faster on a person than the evidence supports and you slow down. The reorg discussion where your team's interests are in conflict with an easier political path and you take the harder road. Your team knows about these moments. Not always in real time, but they will find out. Organizations are not as opaque as leaders think. And every time they find out that you protected them when they didn't have to trust, the trust account grows in ways that engagement initiatives cannot replicate. Mechanism 3, honest uncertainty. This one runs counter to what most of us were taught about leadership. The instinct is the project confidence, to be the person in the room who has the answer, who radiates certainty, who makes others feel secure by appearing to know exactly where the organization is going. That instinct is wrong, not because confidence is bad, but because performed certainty is genuinely uncertain conditions is a form of dishonesty, of being dishonest. The leaders who build the deepest trust are the ones who can say, I don't know exactly how this is going to play out. Here's what I do know. Here's what I'm working on. Here's what I need from you. That combination, honestly, about uncertainty, clarity about direction, and a key ask is more trustworthy than a polished message that, appears over ambiguity. This is especially critical in the context of AI because nobody, not the vendors, not the consultants, not the executives who greenlit the initiative, knows exactly how this technology will shape, how it will reshape your organization over the next 3 years. And the leaders who pretend to know are the ones on their teams that they trust least because the team knows they don't know. And now they know their leader either doesn't know they don't know or isn't willing to admit it. Regardless, neither is good. Mechanism 4, the follow through cadence. This is the simplest mechanism and probably the most consistently violated. Do what you say you were going to do when you said you were going to do it. Not most of the time, consistently. Not the big commitments. Those are easy to track. The small ones. I'll get you that information by Thursday. Let me look into that and then I'll come back to you. I'll make sure you're included in that conversation. Those micro commitments are where trust is won and lost at the operational level because they happen at a consistent basis. They're easily forgettable to the person who made them, and they are almost never forgotten by the person waiting. Your team is not keeping a formal ledger, but they are keeping a felt sense of whether you are someone whose word means something. And that felt sense, more than any assessment, any initiative, any communication strategy, determines how much of themselves they're willing to put into the work you're asking them to do. Metaphor of the day. Today, we're going to the tailor. We're talking about the difference between a suit that was purchased off the rack and a suit that was made for you. Not the difference in price, the difference in relationship. When you walk into a tailor who knows your body, who has your measurements on file, who remembers that your left shoulder sits slightly lower than your right, who knows that you prefer a higher button stance because of how you carry yourself in the room, something different happens. They don't start with the fabric, they start with you. They ask how the last suit is wearing. They notice that you've been carrying tension in your shoulders and they make note about the back seam. They remember that the last time you came in, you mentioned an event that mattered to you and they asked how it went and all of that information. All of that accumulated knowledge of who you are and how you move through the world goes into what they will build for you. The result is a suit that fits in a way that off the rack never will. Not because the fabric is more expensive, because the relationship is more informed. Trust is the tailor's relationship. It's accumulated knowledge of who a person is, how they move, where they carry tension, and what they're walking into applied in a service of building something that actually fits them. You cannot manufacture that relationship. You cannot download it. You build it one fitting at a time. The off the rack suit is the leader who implements the standard engagement program, standard listening sessions, standard feedback process, standard psychological safety training, all of it built for the average person in the average organization. None of it built for those people on your team navigating your organizational context. The tailored suit is the leader who has taken the time to know their people, not just their performance metrics, not just their development plans, but their actual relationship with uncertainty, their actual history with the organizational change, their actual level of confidence in the direction that the organization is heading. And who uses that knowledge to build something? A conversation, a commitment, a structure that actually fits. Here's your assignment this week. And it's simpler than the previous two, but it does require more courage. Pick one person on your team, one person whose AI adoption behavior you've noticed is minor, performative, or resistant. Not the whole team, one person. Someone whose behavior is telling you something, even if you haven't been willing to read it yet. Have the real conversation, not the feedback conversation, the trust conversation, which means you go first. You tell them something that's honest, something real about the uncertainty you're navigating, something genuine about the pressure you're feeling, something true about why this AI initiative matters to you beyond the organizational mandate. You go first. You show your leather. You give them something real before you ask for anything real back. Then ask one question and actually listen. What would make it safer for you to try things and be wrong here? And do not defend, explain, or redirect. Just listen. What they tell you is a map of exactly what trust building looks like in your context with that person. One person, one real conversation. That's the rep this week. Because trust is built one fitting at a time, and the first fitting is always the hardest. It's always as long, as tiring. So to close out, one thing, before you ask your team to be more visible, make sure you're being visible first. Before you ask them to show their work, show yours. Before you ask them to trust the process, give them a reason to trust you. That's not a soft leadership principle. That's a hard operational requirement. Because if you skip it, if you launch the AI initiative on top of a trust deficit and hope the mandate carries it, you will get surface level adoption. You will get the metrics without the behavior change. You will get people who know how to perform engagement while protecting themselves underneath it. And 12 months from now, you will be in a debrief trying to figure out why the initiative didn't land. And someone will say it was the training or the tools or the timing. And none of those things will be the real answer. The real answer would be we asked people to be vulnerable in an environment where vulnerability hadn't been demonstrated to be safe. And we will be surprised when they work. The Walnut Park Avenue, 3 years of boardroom miles. We sold twice. That's the standard. Show your leather, then ask to seek theirs. So that's part 3 of the algorithm doesn't care about your title. We've covered 3 of the 5 leadership problems AI is putting under a spotlight. Part 1, your clarity. Part 2, your org constraints. Part 3, your trust that your team has in you. Part 4, we're going to go into prompt to be prompted. And it's going to be more personal episode of this series because it's about the quality of your thinking. Not your team's thinking, yours. Prompting is a leadership skill, and the quality of your questions determines the quality of your intelligence at every room you walk into, not just the interface. If this series is working for you, please share it. One leader, someone who needs a real conversation, not a comfortable one. That's how it grows. I'm Dre Hub, and this is Sneakers Cars Leadership. Go first, show the leather, build the thing that lasts.